entirely different process in the Old Testament. In the New Testament, however, we have a number of things in the Gospels and Acts and in the epistles that can inform us. So we're going to take special note of about 6 of these and actually look at the passages. The rest of them are, we'll talk about them briefly, but we're not going to turn to them and open the passages and go through them all. Then we're going to talk about reasons for home ministry, why that's something that you can consider, and a strategy for doing that, and then some ideas for home ministry. And actually, when we get into the last half of this, the reasons and strategy and ideas, we're going to want to open that up and have you share some of the thoughts that you have on that score. When you think about your home, there are a lot of things about your home that come to mind. One of them is, it is my home. It's my place of refuge. It's the place where I can go to let my hair down if I still have hair, where I can relax, where the outside world does not intrude. And a lot of times that's how we view our homes, particularly in this era, where you come home, and as you get close to home, you hit a button inside your vehicle and the door goes up, and you hardly even slow down. You pull into the garage, hit another button, the door goes down. You don't interact with your neighbors. You don't have any opportunity, actually, to do that. And we're very different from the era that I grew up in, where you came home and parked your car on the street or in the driveway, and you got out and you waved to your neighbor because you didn't have a chance to pull into a garage. And your home was more of a central location, especially when you had kids. I know when our children were growing up, we had children from other people's homes in and out of our house, and our kids were in and out of other people's houses, and that's just a part of having kids, and I think that still applies today. But I think a lot of times we view our home as a place for us to get away from everybody. And maybe as believers, we should be viewing our home in a different light, thinking about our home as an asset that God has given us in order to fulfill His will for our lives. And one of the aspects of His will for our lives would be then reaching out to our friends and our neighbors. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. So let's take a look at some things from the New Testament. In the Gospels, you have several different examples of people using their homes in a way that reached out to the community. One of those would be Zechariah and Elizabeth in Luke chapter 1. And in verses 59 to 79, you have that section where John the Baptist has been born. The neighbors have arrived, and family has arrived, and they're celebrating with them the birth of their son. And Zechariah still can't speak, and they go through this whole process. What are you going to name him? We're going to name him John. John? Nobody in your family's named John. Why are you naming him John? And they say, let's ask Zechariah, because Elizabeth is the one who said that. And Zechariah writes down his name will be John, and his tongue was loosed. And then the next thing that you read is Zechariah honoring and praising God for what God has done in their lives and what God is going to do in the life of their son. And so their home becomes a point of celebration, but also a point of testimony. And I think that's an important first look in the New Testament about that kind of thing. And then you get into Luke 19. One of the first verses that I memorized as a boy was Luke 19:10. And that's the end of this section on Zacchaeus. You remember the story. Jesus is walking through town. Zacchaeus, being a short man, can't see over the crowd. You just sort of get the picture of this little guy kind of jumping up and down and trying to see what's going on, and he can't see over anybody, so he runs ahead and he climbs up in a sycamore tree so he can see over the heads of the crowd and can see Jesus coming down the street. When Jesus gets to the tree, he looks up, sees Zacchaeus, and says, "Come down, for I'm going to your house today." And Zacchaeus comes down as a new Christian. a new follower of Jesus Christ. Not a Christian in the sense that we would say that he is a part of the church, because the church hadn't been established yet, but a new follower of Jesus Christ. And he goes to his house and invites his friends, who all are what? Tax collectors, publicans. And he makes the statement in front of all of them, my life has been changed by this man. And the result of that change is that I'm going to pay back what I've stolen. I'm going to reward people 4 times for whatever I took from them. Not reward, but give back to people 4 times. And Jesus said, today salvation has come to this house. And Zacchaeus, as a very young new believer, says, I'm going to use my home for a testimony to what God has done in my life. Really, when you get to Matthew chapter 9, Mark 2, and Luke 5, with the home of Matthew, you see the same thing. God calls Matthew, who's a tax collector, and Matthew throws a dinner for all of his friends who are tax collectors. And Jesus is the honored invited guest at this dinner. And Matthew is using his home for the same purpose, to share with people what God has done in his life and let Christ share with people what he was here to do. And then the home of Mary and Martha, and of course there are a number of different things that happened at the home of Mary and Martha. You have the raising of Lazarus in John 11. You have Mary and Martha hosting Jesus and his disciples on a number of occasions, and they use their home. It doesn't really relate to an evangelistic emphasis, except in the sense that when Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, that had an obvious impact on people, and people did trust Christ at that point. So in the Gospels, you have these events, and I think that the home of Zacchaeus and the home of Matthew really strike a chord with what we're going to be talking about tonight. Open your Bibles to Acts chapter 10. Verse 1, there was a certain man in Caesarea called Cornelius, a centurion of what was called the Italian regiment, a devout man, and one who feared God with all his household, who gave alms generously to the people and prayed to God always. Not a believer yet. That is, not a follower of Jesus Christ yet. A devout person who was acting toward the Jewish people in a manner that was consistent with Old Testament teaching in several areas. Certainly, probably not in every area. I say certainly, probably. Probably not in every area, but certainly some areas. About the 9th hour of the day, saw clearly in a vision, an angel of God coming in and saying to him, Cornelius. And when he observed him, he was afraid. What is it, Lord? So he said, your prayers and your alms have come up for a memorial before God. Now send men to Joppa, and send for Simon, whose surname is Peter. He's lodging with Simon, a tanner, whose house is by the sea. He will tell you what you must do. Now, let's skip over here. Verse 24, following day, they entered Caesarea. Now Cornelius was waiting for them and had called together his relatives and close friends. Waiting for them where? At his home. Now, again, Cornelius doesn't know the Lord yet. He's about to be introduced to Jesus and become a Christian. But what he is doing is saying there's something very important that is about to take place. I'm about to hear something very important. And I'm going to invite my family and my close friends. I want people to come to my home to hear this. So even as an unsaved man, he is realizing that he can use his home as a base of operations for letting people come to know who Jesus is and hear this message that Peter's going to bring. I don't think we'll take the time the chapter's 48 verses long. We're not going to read the whole thing, but I just want you to see that that's in the book of Acts, that you have that. And then what you see repeatedly in Acts, remember that there are no church buildings in Acts. In fact, there are no church buildings that I'm aware of anywhere in the New Testament. People are meeting in homes, and you have people meeting in the school of one Tyrannus, whether that was a building separate or if it was something that was a part of his home, we don't really know. It just says the school of Tyrannus. But most of this stuff is taking place in homes. In Acts chapter 12, Peter has been arrested, and he's sitting in prison awaiting execution the next day, and the angel comes and gets him out, and after the angel disappears, Peter realizes that this is not a dream. He pinches himself and heads for Mary's house. Now, it's not that there's a lot of Marys in the New Testament. This is the mother of John Mark. And so he gets to the house, knocks on the door, and inside are all these people from the Jerusalem, the fledgling Jerusalem church, who are together praying for Peter. So the house was being used as a place of concentrated corporate prayer. The people from the church of Jerusalem are together to pray. Not necessarily an evangelistic thing, but certainly a spiritual exercise. Lydia, Acts chapter 16. Paul comes to Philippi, and he is looking for an opportunity to minister in that town. And he goes out by the water, by the river, where people are used to coming to pray. And they meet together, and Lydia comes to know Christ, and she says, I want you to use my home as your base of operations. And he does so. And you can see that in verse 15, as well as in verse 40 in Acts 16. Philippian jailer in Acts 16. This is the man who's saved when the jail is shaken by an earthquake, and he thinks everybody's escaped and he's going to kill himself. And Paul says, don't do that. We're all here. He comes in and trembling and makes that statement in that famous verse, Acts 16:31, 16:30, sirs, what must I do to be saved? Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and you shall be saved, verse 31. And he gets saved, and he brings them out to his home and cleans their wounds, which that has not been done. They've just been beaten and thrown into a filthy prison. And he cleans their wounds and takes care of them, and everybody in his household becomes a believer. So his house is being used, again, for a spiritual purpose, and a purpose that relates to people coming to Christ. The home of Jason in Acts 17, verses 5 through 9, we won't take time to go through that, but that's a home that was a base of operations for Paul in another one of the cities that he visited. The homes, and I say homes because there were various homes, of Priscilla and Aquila, who were believers that became very close companions of Paul, and churches were started in their homes, and not only in one place but also in another. And so they, wherever they went, their home became a base of operations for Christian ministry. Justus and Crispus in Acts chapter 18, verses 7 and 8, their homes were used. The home of Philip the evangelist, Acts 21. When Paul was traveling, he gets off the boat and comes to the home of Philip the evangelist. And it's the same Philip that we're talking about when we're talking, when we have the Ethiopian eunuch on the road. So same guy. And then in Acts 28, and I want you to go to this one, Paul is in prison. He's appealed to Caesar. He's been hauled to Rome with some fun side excursions to the islands as a result of storms. And in verses 30 and 31, it says, Then Paul dwelt 2 whole years in his own rented house and received all who came to him, preaching the kingdom of God and teaching the things which concern the Lord Jesus Christ with all confidence, no one forbidding him. Paul is under arrest. He's under arrest on the basis of the fact that he is a Christian. And he's using that 2-year period of time in this house where he can't leave. It's interesting that it's a rented house. Apparently he was able to rent that and go and be there instead of in some foul prison cell someplace. But he can't leave. He's under arrest. But he uses his home in that setting in order to preach and teach and reach people for Christ. Now, when you come to the epistles, house churches are not just the norm. That's all that you see in the New Testament. They didn't have New Testament church buildings like this. That hadn't occurred yet. If they were meeting together like in a synagogue. But even there, they met together in a synagogue for a little while until there was opposition from the Jewish people, and then from the Jews who did not trust Christ, did not believe in the Lord Jesus. And then they would be meeting someplace else. So the church was in people's houses, and you see that throughout the epistles. The church in Aquila and Priscilla's house, Romans 16, 1 Corinthians 16, 2 Timothy chapter 4. The people who are meeting in your house, the church that is meeting in your house. In Stephanas, in 1 Corinthians 16, verses 15 and 16, there was a church in his house. There was a church at Philemon's house, Philemon chapter 1, verses 1 and 2. There was a church in the home of the elect lady, whoever that elect lady is, in 2 John. And I thought this was interesting as well. Go to Philippians chapter 2. I'm sorry, Philippians chapter 4, verse 22. All the saints greet you, but especially those who are of Caesar's household. Okay, now let me just say that it could mean something different. It might not be saying that there was a church meeting in Caesar's household, but there was a church that was meeting in Rome that composed a significant number of people who were from Caesar's household. So there's a belly of the beast sort of feel to this, right? We're having a meeting in somebody's household, and that household happens to be Caesar. And we're using that group of people as an outreach. And then the home of Lois and Eunice in 2 Timothy chapter 1 and verse 5, if you want to go there as well. Paul's thanking God for Timothy and greatly desiring to see him, thanking him, verse 3, thanking God for him, verse 3, greatly desiring to see him, verse 4, calling to remembrance, verse 5, the genuine faith that is in you, which dwelt first in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and I am persuaded in you also. I didn't put this down as a house church because I don't know that there is a house church here. But here's what there is. There is a woman who has a daughter, and that daughter has a son, and the faith in Christ is being transferred from one generation to the next generation, and the household of these people is a faithful household where the gospel is being shared. You can't really take from this that it's being proclaimed loud and far and wide, but you can say that it's being shared. And one of the people who comes out of this is Timothy, who becomes Paul's right-hand man. There were others. Titus was a right-hand man. Silas was a right-hand man. Barnabas was a right-hand man. But as time wore on in Paul's life, and he began getting close to the end of his life in ministry, the person he really wanted to see and that really wanted to focus on was Timothy, who came out of this house of Lois and Eunice. Now, what do we take from all that? Well, the thing I think that we can take from that is that the people in the New Testament who became followers of Jesus Christ did not view their homes as a place to get away from the world. Instead, they viewed their homes as a place to minister to the world. They viewed their home as an opportunity, as a chance to say, I want to reach people for Christ. I want to have an impact on the community. I want the church to be able to meet here. I want people to be able to use my home for the cause of Christ. So that's what you see in the New Testament. And it's not just an isolated event. It's over and over and over and over and over again that we see this in the New Testament. So before I get past the biblical part of this, we're kind of wrapping that up, but before I get past it, do you have any thoughts or questions or comments on that part of this? Does that strike you? Mark is ready with the instrument of projection. Okay, let's move on. Why do home ministry? What would be some reasons for doing this? Number one, you're on your own turf. It's a place where you're comfortable. Before we came over, Jan and I just kind of, while she was up walking, I was sitting in my chair just looking and letting her read all these things. But we have a number of different things on the walls in our home. We've had many of our neighbors into our home. And without us ever even verbally saying a word about Christ, they are being inundated because we have stuff in there. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. We have Amazing Grace in a number of different places. We have all kinds of different things up. Places that talk about a new song, since we love music. And that new song is coming from the Lord. And there's all kinds of stuff about Christ. There's stuff about salvation on the walls. And so people, if anybody who comes into our home is coming into our turf. I have an opportunity in my home just by inviting somebody in to share Christ because of the things that we have placed up on our wall and because of the fact that, people know who we are. The other part about that is that when you go into people come into your home, they come in on your terms. So you don't bring people into your home and they just automatically start a riotous, drunken, revelry type party in your home because it's not their home. They can do that at their home if they want, but it's your home. So you have an opportunity to set the stage, set the rules, if you will, as to how these things are going to happen. So you're operating on your own turf. It's a place where you're comfortable. Second, you and they are in a small group. What's the benefit of a small group? What are the benefits, say it that way, of a small group? All right, so yeah, we're going to put the mic in front of you because we are recording this for people who can't be here to see it. So one of the things is
conversation.
A small group allows you the opportunity to hold a conversation and to have people involved in the conversation. You know people, I know people. I'm not one of them. I'll speak up in a larger group. It's fine. I don't mind that. But you know people and I know people who wouldn't speak up if there were more than two other people in the room. Maybe more than one other people in a room. Some folks who wouldn't speak up if there's anybody else in the room. But especially folks who wouldn't speak up if there's multiple people in the room. A lot. And so a small group helps with that conversation. What else? What's another benefit of a small group?
Everybody can have a turn to speak without running overtime.
Okay, so in a group like this, which is still would be considered by many people a small group, but it's not all that small. What do we have, about 20 or 25 in here right now? To have that many people all together, not everybody's going to get to talk. But in a small group of 3 or 4 or 5, that opportunity exists. I'll tell you, in our Timothy group stuff, when we first started, we were doing groups of, I don't know, Mark, you were in the first one of the first ones of these, probably 4 or 5 or 6, about 6 guys. And we've just pared that down. We want not more than 3, maybe 4, but only in certain circumstances, because we want that to be very individualized, and we want it to be the kind of thing where everybody has a chance to speak up. Good. What else? Yes, Joanne.
People are more inclined to open up and ask you questions or say things that they wouldn't bring up otherwise, but something that is bothering them or something that's personal to them, they're more likely to bring that up.
Okay. That sort of goes along with the concept of conversation and the idea of everybody, but there is a comfort level that comes with being in a small group with respect to personal things that isn't there in a larger section. Yes, Mark?
And you can develop friendships better that way.
Okay. You can build some relationships in a small group. One of the reasons that small groups are very important, critically important in large churches, is because you don't build good relationships in a large church without the small group. One of the things about a smaller church is that you can build relationships in a smaller church. In a larger church, you have to have the small groups to do that. So you're not going to build friendships with 1,000 people in a room or 5,000 people in a room. You're just not going to build the friendships that way. You might get to know somebody like who sits nearby you, but guess what that amounts to? Small group, right? So it's the small groups where you build relationships. All right, so you and they are in a small group. Number 3, you have a circle of influence that no one else in the church has. Your circle of influence is different from my circle of influence. How many of you here play hockey? I don't anymore either, but I did for quite a while, and there's a circle of influence that relates to those hockey players. I'm going to be going to see one of them because when the hockey season starts in earnest, I'm going to call him and find out a night when we can go and just sit and watch hockey, and I can talk to him a little bit because he's got what's potentially a fatal disease, and I want to talk to him. I have a circle of influence that you don't have. You have a circle of influence that I don't have, and let me say, you have a benefit that I don't have. When I go to talk to somebody about spiritual things, they see me as oftentimes as this is the thing that I do because this is my job. That's not true for you. If you're not in ministry, you're doing this and they're seeing you doing this out of your heart, not just because it's your job. Now, I hope that I'm not doing it because of my job, but people will view it that way, whether it's true or not. So you have a circle of influence that no one else in the church has, and that circle of influence needs the impact of the gospel, and you can use your home to do that. I mentioned hockey. Christmas some years back, we had 11 of the guys that I play hockey with in our home for a meal. And we prayed, and that meal was after a Sunday morning service, Christmas service at our church. And they came over, and we prayed, and we ate together, and we fellowshiped together. You can have fellowship with unsaved people. It's on a different level, but you can do it. And there was a noticeable difference in how those guys responded to me after that. And built some friendships. I'd love to be able to say that half of them are in our church right now and come to Christ, but that's not the case. I wish it were, but we don't all reap. We sometimes plant seeds and sometimes water, and God gives the increase later on. You have a circle of influence that you need to impact. Number 4, if you're in your home, your guests are not intimidated by a church. How many of you know people who would not come to something at a church? Vicki, didn't you just have a recent experience with this? Go ahead and share that. Yep, with the mic.
I have a lifelong friend, and her father just recently had a heart attack. And we had been praying and everything like that. Anyways, we invited him to the game dinner. He was all for it. We thought, oh, this is great. We'll finally get him in church. And then he found out it was at church.
Yep, and they wouldn't come. Those people are our neighbors. They live about 4 doors down from us on the same street. But the daughter is one of Vicky's friends. But as soon as they found out it was at a church, not interested. So you have a different venue that is less threatening to people than a church. We don't view our church as threatening. I mean, do you? I don't see this as a threatening place. But people who don't know Christ often will see a church facility or a church congregation that's gathering as a threatening place, where your home is a different story. We just had a gazebo raising, a good old-fashioned Baptist gazebo. The Amish build farms, we build gazebos. We just don't shoot as high. And in the course of that, we had, I'm going to say about a dozen, probably, when you count the kids, probably a dozen of our unsaved neighbors in our home, because they helped us to build this gazebo. Let me tell you, I wouldn't have got it up without them. There were some people who had some tremendous skills in that area. And we were able to feed them, and they were in our home, and it was was not a church setting. There were people there. There's one couple. When I say one couple, it's a lesbian couple, but they have on their front door, they have this thing that says, if you're here to talk about politics or sell us something or talk about religion, you'll have to talk to our dogs. And they have a couple of big dogs. So they want nothing to do with that stuff. But they were in our home, and we had conversations, and we had prayer and before our meal, and it was an opportunity, and they were not intimidated by that. Would they come to our church? No way. But they came to our home. You can be informal. You can serve refreshments. You can talk openly. We talked about that just a minute ago when Joanne mentioned that. Number 6, you can meet as friends. So and that kind of goes with the idea of being informal. You can meet as friends. You're not just this isn't just a religious experience. Okay, we are friends. And that friend thing can turn into a conversation about Christ, but you can start as friends. Number 7, if you're doing a Bible study, you can set the time. You can set the length. That is how long the study will last each week. And the duration, how many weeks. You have flexibility if you're doing a Bible study to do something in your own home. Here's one of the things that you're hamstrung by at our church. You're going to get what Pastor John and I give you. Right? We're the ones doing we're the ones setting the standards for this. We're the ones setting the Bible studies and the lengths and all that kind of thing, and it comes from us. In your home, you can set that. It's one of the benefits of that. Number 8, if you're hosting a holiday event, you can take advantage of similar interests, similar time off work, and so forth. So you can find out when people are free, and you can take advantage of that. Number 9, maybe this should be number 1. People are lost and need to hear the gospel. One of the reasons why you ought to use your home, because the people around you are lost and need to hear the gospel. It doesn't mean they're going to get saved, but you have a responsibility to make sure they hear the gospel. And number 10, and this kind of goes back to our COVID days, which they're trying to reinstitute again, but kind of goes back to that. People are disconnected. And a lot of people are longing for personal interaction. They miss it. It's been stolen from them. And they don't like that. And they wouldn't necessarily say it or know how to articulate that. But they're lonely. And that has particularly impacted younger people. A lot of older people want to be lonely. But not all of them, you know. You go to somebody who is shut in. They can't get out. And you go and try to have a 10-minute visit. See what that gets you. Doesn't work that way. They're lonely, and they want to have some interaction. All right. Other thoughts on reasons? Anything else that you would throw out here as for a reason for doing home ministry? And does that make sense? We're certainly not advocating that we shut the church down. That is the church facility. We're not saying that. But we are saying that in connection with what we're doing here at this church building, we as the church can be using our homes to impact people for Christ. And the church doesn't revolve just around this facility. Claude?
Well, it's it was the model. The original plan, or at least the procedure or technique or strategy was to do the natural thing, come to your home. And that was kind of the example that was taught from day one, basically. So let's just keep her going.
Yeah.
It works.
Yeah, and there are a number of reasons for that. Probably some financial reasons for why that was the case. Obviously, some small group types of reasons for why that was the case. When you hear Paul talk about to the church and he'd say at Philippi, it wouldn't be a group of people that all met together in the same large building. And probably when let me do what Pastor Bailey often does, step aside from the Bible, my opinion, but probably Part of the reason why they had church meetings in homes is because they couldn't get everybody together in one place. Probably because it was more comfortable. Probably because there was some opposition in some of the towns. So there could have been a number of different reasons why they would have been meeting in homes. The idea of a church building where people met together in a church building probably didn't happen, if I remember my church history correctly, probably not for the first several hundred years. It was probably 300, 400 AD before you had buildings being erected as places for people to meet. One other probably. When you see that in Scripture where Paul says to the elders at, there were multiple places where people were meeting, and you had multiple elders in this one town of Philippi, for instance, or the church of Ephesus. Remember in Acts 20, as Paul is headed toward Jerusalem, he meets with the elders from Ephesus. And there were multiple elders who met him at Ephesus. And they were probably responsible for multiple house churches. Okay, Mark?
Now, this wouldn't be necessarily for any of us, but did the Wirtzes have home meetings before they found a place for Rustic Hills before this got built?
I don't know how often they had home meetings. They started the church, excuse me, in the YMCA downtown. And fairly early after they decided they were going to start a church, they were meeting at the YMCA. And they met there for probably 3 years before for about 3 years before this facility was constructed and they were able to meet in here. So I don't know how often they used their home. They might have started a Bible study there, but I don't know the answer to that for sure.
The idea of a house church is fascinating. I'm thinking of Corinth, like how disorderly they are. Well, these are houses. So he must have went to a few houses that were absolutely crazy and with chaos and disorder and whatnot. And I'm thinking of today, we have a blessing in the United States to have sometimes very, very beautiful buildings. Sometimes you put up a building and it's the best you can get. But we might not always have this blessing. And you look at the Old Testament, well, if that's the case, the church still moves on.
Yes.
And it's interesting how the church will be here until the God removes it. And it doesn't matter what situation we find ourselves in. We can go back to houses. That's fine.
Or forests.
Or Russia.
China. The faithful people in some other parts of the world who know Christ meet where they can meet, but they don't have church buildings. If they had a church building, it would be raided. And if there's a church that's meeting in a building and the government's letting it go, you probably don't want to be in that church. So, there's all kinds of reasons why house churches existed then and some exist today. Doesn't mean you can't have a building like this, but it does mean that that meeting in someone's home is not a bad thing. Jan?
Where the rubber meets the road. Usually in a couple, the old statement is opposites attract, and usually one is more outgoing than the other. And that makes it easier for that person to have people in, but we need to be willing, and that's out of our comfort zone a lot of times. And I think we need to be willing to stretch if we really mean business for the Lord.
We've been talking about a home Bible study. We haven't done it. We've used our home in a lot of different ways, but we haven't had like a 4-week Bible study in our home. We've been talking about that. And that would be something different for us as a couple. And we really need to be thinking in that direction. Claude?
Back to kind of the model idea or the prototype, it was obviously a natural thing to happen. I'm sure as churches and congregations grew and got bigger and bigger, the idea of larger groups getting together necessitated really big house or something else. But the idea of it centered around family, the family unit is so biblical. And it's true here. at this congregation, of course, but if it's in a home, it's more daily, fits daily life or real life, not just a set aside thing. It carries over to a more natural thing. One of the most interesting things I ever saw was in southern Colorado. There was a rancher, and the home had 3 generations living in it. They had junior high, senior high kids, the parents, and the grandparents, and they were all believers, and it was just so wholesome. It was in the home, and they'd have other folks over to join them. So just God had a good idea when he thought of that.
Can you think of one that wasn't good?
Poodles.
Poodles. You would have a verbal altercation with Dwayne Pope on that one. They love their poodles. Acts chapter 2, verse 41. Those who gladly received his word were baptized, and that day, about 3,000 souls were added. So from the outset in the Jerusalem church, they had a huge number of believers and no place to meet. You got to believe that and you can see that it happened, that the Jewish authorities were not thrilled with them coming to the temple. I mean, they did go to the temple, but they got arrested when they did that. So they were meeting in all these different houses. And then Acts chapter 4, so not very far into that, many of those who heard the word believed, verse 4, and the number of men came to be about 5,000. So this church is just swelling in the early days, and they had to find places for the people to meet. All right, so you've listened to this so far, and you've thought to yourself, it would be right for us to use our home for ministry. What would be your strategy to do that? And I haven't left it to your imagination as what I'm thinking. The first thing to do in that is to bathe the process in prayer. Start talking with the Lord. How can we use our home? For whom can we use our home? And then ask God for specific people to join you. Don't assume that on the basis of your charisma or whatever it is that you have going for you, that you're going to attract a group to your home and you're going to teach them about Jesus and they're going to get saved without the ministry of the Holy Spirit involved. Remember that this is spiritual work and it needs to be guided by the Lord. So bathe the process in prayer. That's first. All right, Mark, you had your hand up.
It was nothing serious.
Oh, it was not serious. Okay. We can share it later then. I mentioned a circle of influence. Start with your own friends and neighbors, and I could add into their family. You may have some family members who don't know Christ. Family is a unique group. But I hear of people who came to Christ and their entire family is unsaved, and over time that family begins to get saved one by one until most of the family or all of the immediate family and maybe some of the extended family as well are saved. You could talk to Fernando Naranjo about the ministry that he had in Ecuador with his family. He came to Christ as a result of the ministry of Baptist Missions missionaries, and by the time they left Ecuador, almost all of his family, if not all of his family, were believers. But it is a more difficult, more challenging type of evangelism ministry to your family. For a number of reasons. Don't necessarily have to get into all that, but it is a different dynamic. That said, family, friends, neighbors, start with the circle of influence that God has given you. That's a great place to start. You have a lot of people that you know who don't know Christ, who need to know Christ. Start with those people. And host some sort of a get-acquainted meal. Honestly, that's what we were doing with these hockey guys. It never turned into a Bible study, although I asked the question on several occasions, would any of you guys be interested in doing a Bible study before we play? And I could never build interest in that, so it didn't happen. But the get acquainted meal allows you to become less of a threat. You are at that point a normal human being. I think one of the benefits, the great benefits of something that we do here at the church, that like a game dinner or like trunk or treat or like some of these other things that are community related, is that people get to see us in a setting that says, you know, these folks are normal. They're not weird. They're not drop off the edge of the earth. You know, they're not running around with placards on front and back, the earth is about to end. And I mean, they're normal. They're normal people. And I don't have to be afraid of them. And I think that's a good aspect of a get acquainted meal type of thing. And then fourth, keep evangelism in mind while you're doing this. It doesn't mean that every time you get together, the opportunity is going to be there to lead somebody to Christ. But keep evangelism in mind. This isn't just a coffee klatch. It's an opportunity to, you're trying to build opportunities to bring Christ into their lives. So something that starts with prayer, something that moves to your circle of influence, something that you do in order to allow people to get acquainted with you, and then also keeping evangelism in the forefront of your mind. Any other thoughts that you would share with respect to strategy for home ministry?
Even what we're talking about may feel like a leap for some people. I think, first of all, if you're not there, and it just depends, maybe you feel like this is easier than having even believers in your home. But we need to be willing to be open that way. And I've always thought, if God's given me this home, it's not my home, it's His home. And I need to be willing to use it like I believe that. And maybe before you even do this, you have to be willing to have believers in your home and have fellowship that way, so you're even comfortable at that level, if it takes that. The other thought I had when I said what I said before is Dan and Christine Grings. Christine went to a country she had never seen, didn't know. Dan grew up there, but not Christine. And she didn't even have a believing family behind her. And when you talk to them, they have people knocking on their door day and night, day in and day out. We couldn't handle that. I don't know that I could handle that. But that's where they live. That's how they live in Africa.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we're so withdrawn from those things that we only want, what we're comfortable with our family, and we're not willing to open up. And I think that's something that we need to grow in.
It is. I think it's how we view our homes. And for Dan and Christine, they live in a different culture, and in that culture, want and deprivation is the norm. And so people are desperate for things that we wouldn't normally see that here. That said, that's what they have. That's the situation in which they live. And when they come back to the States, they can't wait to get back. I mean, they just are anxious to get back and minister to people. So their home is not just their home. Their home is a dispensary. Their home is a place for a place of refuge for other people who are trying to get away from other things that are dangerous and so forth. So I do like the idea of, this should be in here, if you're thinking about a home Bible study, maybe start with people that you know are believers, and start that process with people who you know are believers. And that will have another added benefit. It helps them to think about the process of doing this. And it also helps them, it helps you expand this circle of influence that we've been talking about, because now their circle of influence is involved as well. Anything else on a strategy that you can think of? Yes, Joanne?
This is something that hasn't been touched on, but having your children there, when you're doing all this, the kids, when they're little, they may not be saved yet, but this will also be a testimony to them. But when they see you having people in the house all the time and caring about them, usually when they grow up, they really care about people. And it's really an area that we don't think about what this is doing for the kids that are in our house already.
We had a young lady that started attending our church in the evening. She was a Roman Catholic in her upbringing, and she was attending a Roman Catholic church in the morning, and she had a 5-year-old son. And they were driving by our church, and he pointed at the sign and said, "I want to go to that church sometime." And so she said, "Sure." And they came over here on a Sunday night, and it wasn't very long into what we were doing, her mouth just dropped open, and she said afterwards, "I've never heard this stuff. I've never heard anything like this." And we had her over for dinner, she and her son. So that would have been, I don't know, somewhere around 6 o'clock on a Thursday evening, if I remember right. And our kids, all of whom had to go to school the next day, became the babysitters, if you will, for this 5-year-old boy. And they played games and they did all kinds of stuff downstairs while we talked with Mama upstairs. And this went on until midnight. So this conversation went on and on and on. It wasn't until about midnight when she finally said, "So if what you're saying is true, you don't think that I am a Christian, do you?" And the door opened for us to share this is what a Christian really is. So your kids can have a ministry in that regard.
Yeah.
Just a little quicker.
Our kids had a big impact, and I think that's part of when we really saw growth, is because they would bring people in, their friends from school, whatever, they would bring kids in, and especially our boys right now are very faithful in their churches, and that has had a big impact on them.
Yeah. All right. This is sort of an aside, but I would say this too: the size of your home doesn't make a difference. So if you have a large home or a small home, you can do this kind of thing. It just what the difference would be how many people can we invite in. So if you have a small home, you don't want to invite 40 people to your homes. You just don't have room for that. But you could still do another couple or two. And so the size of your home doesn't limit what you can do. It can be an apartment, it can be a townhome, it can be that kind of thing, and you could still make this work. All right, we're already at 6, but let me share some ideas for home ministry. Number 1, utilize holiday opportunities. There was a time, in fact, I still have it all on my computer, all this neighborhood Christmas fellowship, neighborhood Christmas fellowship, where we were talking about having the people in our church try to do this. We tried to do it in an organized fashion. It wasn't necessarily all that successful, to be honest with you, but the concept of a neighborhood Christmas fellowship is a good concept because people are used to getting together around Christmas. And it's an opportunity. You can utilize the openness of people during that holiday season in order to have an inroad like this. You can do July 4th and Memorial Day and Labor Day barbecues. You can do a Thanksgiving dinner. You can do a New Year's Eve celebration. There are a lot of different holidays when you can do some things where you could be involved in other people's lives and use your home for that benefit. Number 2, consider a neighborhood event to break the ice, like a block party. And that kind of goes along with number 1. You could do a July 4th kind of a thing, a Memorial Day kind of a thing. When we moved into this neighborhood, we heard rumors about what they used to do. Our street is 1 block long. So on one end of it, it dead ends, and on the other end of it, dead ends. And, it doesn't dead end, it tees. If it dead ended at both ends, you wouldn't get into it. But it tees on both ends. And so it's just a 1 block long. And my understanding is, back in the day, they used to put car blocks, or whatever they did, on both ends of the street, and they'd have a big block party. It's about, I don't know, maybe a dozen, 15 houses on there, and they would just have a block party. And since we moved in, they never did it. I don't know why. Could be us. But that would be an idea as well, to get something like that going. It gives you an opportunity to get to know your neighbors a little bit and break the ice. And number 3, utilize home Bible studies. And there are a lot of them. Tom Miller has mentioned the John studies that his dad put together. What was the one that we were talking about here recently that was a 4-part series? I think, that our Ireland, I think he mentioned a 4-part series, or maybe it was, say again, was it? No, he wasn't talking about that one, although that's another one that you could use. But you're right, there are a lot of different kinds of Bible studies. And I would say this, if you're going to do a home Bible study, make sure that there is a duration to this thing. I'm not asking you to be a part of a Bible study that goes on for months at a time, right? We're going to have a Bible study in our home for the next 5 years. Would you like to come every Thursday night? Not going to happen. So do it for 4 weeks. I think that's the kind of thing that would attract people. They'll be willing to make that kind of a commitment. All right, other ideas for home ministry? Are you done tonight? Be quiet. Go ahead, John.
I have heard, so you've mentioned already with all the material, the joy material, hope material. I think those are more discipleship. They're longer than 4 weeks. There's exchange, the small one, which is 4 weeks. John study, 4 weeks. I think we said balanced evangelism has a short one, I think, or is that?
And 1 by 1.
One by one is all.
That was one that Bill mentioned.
That's a longer one, but so much material. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's plenty to choose from, but you can't invent a house out of nothing.
Yeah.
We need somewhere to go.
We'll talk a little bit more about the kinds of discipleship materials that are available next Sunday night when we get together and chat. We're going to talk about discipling and this is sort of going to be the segue into our next section, which is going to be the spectrum of discipleship. But we'll talk about discipling next week and share some thoughts on materials. Anything else that you want to add before we wrap up? Where are you pointing at?
She looked at me like she wanted to say something.
Oh, and now she's looking away. Nope, not me. All right, let's stand. We'll be dismissed with a word of prayer. Claude, would you close us? Amen. If you have other thoughts or things that you would like to share with us, I'd be happy to pass those on. Just let us know. Lord bless you. You're dismissed.